Chapter 8 of Hints for Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Hints for Lovers by Theodore Arnold Haultain. Chapter 8 on Courtship. Quote, Un amant fait la court où s'attache son cœur. Unquote. Molière. A woman really in love and sure of her lover delights in toying with a sort of coquetry of love, as if it pleased her to try to win over again that the winning of which gave so exquisite a pleasure. And perhaps the coquetry of love is the surest test of an unquestionable love, for when possession can afford to play at pursuit, this but proves possession complete. Sometimes an assumed love will resort to the pretty tricks of a real one, in order to assure its object, or to reassure itself. Surrender, after a protracted siege, has its advantages. At all events, both M and N can look back to more demi-semi-happy incidents when the courtship has been long. Happy that couple can laugh over the incidents of courtship afterwards. It is a portent of impending ill if they cannot. Half-heartedness in courtship is not only suicidal, it is murderous. On the other hand, remember that in courtship there are various and varying stages, but there is always the home gallop. Remember, too, that what is suitable at one stage of courtship is ruinous at another, and it is only the old whip who knows when to push the pace. In courtship to force the running is hazardous. Though we win, the victory loses its sweets. And in courtship, men too often ride on the snaffle, in matrimony too often on the curb. Courtship asks for cash payment. Matrimony has often to allow unlimited credit. Insolvency is not unknown. In courtship, all auxiliaries but the rival. No one will impede a lover save another lover. In the presence of a woman, man is by nature a definite animal. The women who recognize this are often the most successful. Indeed, many are the refined and gentle women who in after life regret that they did not more openly cope with their less delicately minded sisters. Nevertheless, nothing is more astonishing than a woman's tact in encouraging a man. In courtship modulated and musical tones count for much. Who, with harsh speech, can assail a lady's ear? No woman thinks she can be wooed too often, and few women can forego an opportunity to fascinate. In courtship the woman is the whole world to the man. In matrimony the man is the whole world to the woman. In courtship the slightest suspicion of condescension is fatal, for true love is a greater leveller than anarchy. In courtship the wooer to the wooed is, in Juliet's phrase, the god of her idolatry. In matrimony he is lucky if he is the idol of her deity. It is a question which is the sweeter, a spontaneous courtship or one that has sprung from friendship. In a spontaneous courtship there is all the charm of novelty. In a courtship that has grown out of affection there is all the truthfulness of friendship. But friendship and courtship are two totally distinct things. In courtship men and women meet on the flowery, thorny common of love. In friendship men and women invite each other over to their respective plots. So a friend will show a friend all over his domain. A lover can but point out to the lover the flowers and thorns which grow in the soil to which they are both strangers. It is an open question whether in matters pre-matrimonial the mode of the French is not preferable to that of the Anglo-Saxon, whether, that is, prudence and prevision are not more certain hair-bangers of matrimonial happiness than are impulse and passion. The French couple, when wedded, are virtually strangers. The Anglo-Saxon have already together enacted some scenes of the matrimonial drama. Yet it is an open question also whether a more durable domestic affection is not built up from the pristine foundation of total ignorance than from that of a partial acquaintanceship. The American Elizabeth Peterson, before she became Madame Jerome Bonaparte, could write, "I love Jerome Bonaparte, and I prefer to be his wife, were it only for a day, to the happiest union." The continentalized Madame Jerome Bonaparte, 26 years after she had ceased to be Miss Elizabeth Patterson, could write, "Do we not know how easily men and women free themselves from the fetters of love, and that only the stupid remain caught in these pretended bonds? After all, little do any couple know of each other before marriage. Besides, does a delightful romance envelop the nuptials of strangers? At all events, even if precaution is a foe to impulse, few will be found to deny that strangeness is by no means inimical to passion. Perhaps, then, fathers and mothers and uncles and aunts can form a better judgment as to the suitability and adaptability to each other of two young, ardent, and headstrong boys and girls can these themselves, since fathers and mothers and uncles and aunts know full well that impulse and passion often prove materials too friable for the many-storied fabric of marriage. At all events, the French mode of contracting a marriage precludes the possibility of perilous and precocious affairs of the heart. Perhaps the mistake that ardent and headstrong boys and girls make is in thinking that impulse and passion are the keys of paradise. Their elders know that impulse and passion are sometimes the keys of purgatory. Prudence and prevision are not keys to any supernal or infernal existence. They are merely guidebooks to a terrestrial journey. At all events, it is significant that, which might be added as a lemma, widows rarely choose unwisely. Over that much bethought of, much surmised about thing, a proposal of marriage, every young woman weaves a preconceived halo of romance, but in 19 cases out of 20 a proposal is either unexpected or disappointing. That is, many a girl has almost held her breath with anxiety as she saw the great question coming, then almost cried with vexation at the way it came. For often either the wrong man proposes or the right man proposes stupidly. The woman looks for ideal surroundings, a dramatic situation, and impassioned and poetic utterance. Usually the man seizes a commonplace opportunity and stutters. Probably the ideal proposal occurs only in novels. And yet, perhaps, after all, the real proposal is more complimentary to woman than is the ideal. At least perhaps the aberration and obfuscation of the man is proof, once, one, of her potency, and two, of his sincerity. Did man keep his head, and woman be quite so sure of his heart? Yet it may be that in these matters woman is liable to err, since rarely, if ever, does a woman's heart run away with her head. When it does, ah, the momentary bliss of unreasoning emotion! Yet woman does right to keep her head, for almost every woman's happiness depends upon what she does with her heart, unless indeed she elects to go through life homeless, childless, and unespoused. For though it is the wife that makes the home, it is the man who must provide for it. And since man by nature is probably nomadic and polygamic, not his to debate whether to give rein to emotion. Woman by nature is in far different case. For the sake of her child, woman must bind the nomad to herself. Accordingly, it is woman who is the true agglutinator and civilizer of society. Therefore it comes about that to order wisely her emotions is the inherited instinct of woman. Wherefore woman is the conserver of the nation, and this in more senses than one. End of chapter 8.